with one of my truly favorite NFL writers out there in a video that encapsulates all that is Radio Row. I had Larry Krueger filming me talking to my buddy Sam Batesh. Then all of a sudden, JT the Brick walked up. Mike Sando stepped in and did a cameo in the appearance before everybody got out cameoed by Wayne Newton himself. Again, Mike, you're a lot of things. You're not Wayne Newton. You're not. You're just
I'm not Wayne Newton. I mean, I can bring you Muhammad Ali over my shoulder. That's as good as I can do here. But you love the Super Bowl. I hope it's in Vegas again. I know it will be, but I could have it there regularly because it was just kind of it's such a fun place.
Every other year, like you want to put it in Miami, New Orleans, no objections. Get back to Vegas as quickly as you can because that town can handle a Super Bowl. It was like the Super Bowl was one of 4 or 5 things happening that weekend, and it was just no big deal when it turns other towns into gridlock. So I thought Vegas handled it really well. And it was great to see you there, brother. Thank you so much. Mike and I have been talking football for years. He is now a senior NFL writer at The Athletic. I'm thinking when we met, what were you at the Seattle Times covering the Seahawks?
Oh, well, hey, I was at the Tacoma News Tribune. Close.
Tacoma News Tribune,
Close.
pardon me.
Tacoma News Tribune. Yeah, huge distinction. I'm sure to all the listeners or viewers. Yeah, so I covered the Seahawks for the Tacoma News Tribune from 98 to 07-ish, and then went to ESPN from 07-ish to into 13. No, past 13 to into 19. But I had done the NFC West for ESPN that maybe about 08 to 13. So there was a lot going on there because I was around the 49ers a lot then, really covering them and going to their practices and camps and, almost doing it like a beat, but I was doing the division.
Yeah, no, and you did a hell of a job. That certainly brought us closer together. Great dinner at the House of Prime Rib one night, and it's been a beautiful relationship ever since then. Thank you for joining me over here on YouTube, Mike. I really do appreciate it. And let's hop right in because, again, the reason why I think you're so valuable as a resource to my audience specifically is not only your inner working knowledge of the Niners, but the NFC West at large. And let me just straight up ask you, are the Niners, after this offseason, free agency, draft included, still the team to beat in the NFC West as they have been the last few years, or did the Rams, possibly the new look Seattle Seahawks, leapfrog them in terms of teams that you think could walk away with the division title?
I don't think so. I think it's still the 49ers. I think they're still the best team. I do think that, one thing, we should probably look at the numbers on this, but I felt like they had their core kind of 5 eligible receiver guys pretty healthy last year. For the most part, I think there wasn't a long stretch where they were missing Christian McCaffrey or Debo or Ayuk. So that's always been a little bit of a worry spot for them. They, the way those guys play, right? They're taking hits. Some of the Debo takes hits like running backs sometimes. So right. I think that would be my one, kind of worry. I think we saw a little bit last year, some of the pass rush depth probably, wasn't what it had been. There were some leaks on defense, maybe a little bit more. So, I think they're holding on within this window. I don't feel like they've made a big jump forward. That's hard to do when you're already a Super Bowl team. So, I think there's some vulnerabilities there that I wouldn't just say are going to happen but what are the odds that all those guys that are key core players in that offense, Trent Williams for that matter, right? At this stage of their career, that you're just going to have them all for the whole year and in the playoffs. I think that's kind of the thing that remains to be seen, right? Do they have some injuries there or some attrition at that position that maybe doesn't cause the window to close, but makes it shrink a little bit here because they're deep into the cycle with this team.
Yeah. It feels like this is officially their last best chance. It's not their last chance, but it's certainly the last best chance to field a team this robust, this many Pro Bowlers, this deep at all levels of offense and defense. And as soon as Brock's new money kicks in, the puzzle's going to fit together much differently.
It is. It will be different. And then you won't have as much margin for error in the draft when you miss on a pick or that sort of a thing. Your ability to go sign, a free agent or even pay some of your other own guys. That happens to most of these teams. Look at the great Seattle teams, when Russell Wilson was cheap, right? Russell was a really good quarterback, but he wasn't, and I think this has been borne out. He, he wasn't Peyton Manning. He wasn't going to put the whole thing on his shoulders and be in the Super Bowl anyway. Once that defense fell off and Marshawn Lynch wasn't there, they were a different team and they were still good, but it's a long time since they've been in a championship game, right? And it sort of ties, if you go back and look to when they started really paying Russell Wilson, they're not going out and signing Cliff Averill and Michael Bennett, right? You're not able to do that. So now you miss on a few drafts and you're like, okay, they're 9-8 now, right? They're still a good team. Your coach isn't going to get fired until it happens too many years in a row. But a number of years go by, you look back and you go, geez, we haven't been in that championship window. So that can definitely happen and probably will to some extent once Purdy's making a ton of money.
It feels like we're a little bit too far removed from the Super Bowl to do any post-mortem on the game itself. But where do you think the 49ers fell short in the big game against Kansas City? Is there any, spot where you say that's where they lost the Super Bowl other than, the decision to take the ball at the start of overtime?
Yeah, which, I think that was unfortunate, just more in that they came across as not having as good of a plan as Kansas City did, right? As to whether or not that, what you should do in that situation, I think that's open for debate. And I'm not willing to say that was what doomed him. I think certainly the in-game injury, losing one of your best coverage linebackers, that was that hurts. That was a
we
big
didn't hear
deal for
much
them.
about Travis Kelce up to that point in the game.
Yeah.
And then we heard a lot about Travis Kelce from that point going forward.
Yeah. And then, I think as we've seen in recent years, there's just one Mahomes. So, you can hold him down and in check, but late in the game, when you need him, he's going to do some Mahomes type stuff. And it's no secret, but I mean, that's a pretty, if Patrick Mahomes were on the 49ers, they probably would have won the Super Bowl. That's no disrespect to Brock Purdy, right?
Right.
He's just magic sometimes and can do some different things, been in those situations so many times. And I think that you have to say that was a big part of the game.
Well, and Mike, you do such great work. I think people look forward to your work all year long, but your quarterback tiers column has become like an annual rite of passage that a lot of talking head shows do entire segments about. And you get so much fantastic publicity out of this. I'm glad that it's happening for you. I'm guessing that Patrick Mahomes remains almost on his own particular one line in your quarterbacking tiers. And how many spots down the shelves do we have to go until we find Brock Purdy?
Okay, so yeah, Mahomes has been, and I'm sure will be, unanimous tier one. I'm just going to be starting this week to gather that stuff. We always wait till after the draft because we need to see which quarterbacks for the starters, right? In different places. It's not going to change a whole lot from now. I think Purdy was definitely undervalued last year. And some of that was just because the nature of the tiers, right? So tier one, hey, the guy can put it on his back. If we have to throw to win the game, he can do it. Tier two, sort of that some of the time, but maybe there's a hole or two in his game.
Right. Game manager plus.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think Matt Ryan was a really good tier two quarterback. Now, in any given 1 year, you give him Kyle and the number one offensive line. He may produce like a tier one, but he's really probably a two. Tier three, kind of middle of the pack. Maybe that's Kirk Cousins for most of his career, Andy Dalton. They're good. You go to the playoffs, but they're probably not going to differentiate. And tier four is really what hurt Purdy, because tier four is either, the guy who you don't want to start the whole year, Ryan Fitzpatrick or somebody, he's a fine, or it's not enough information. So Brock Purdy last year got a lot of fours that were not slap in the face fours. They weren't saying you're a four, we wouldn't want you to be the starter. It was more like, hey, you just haven't played a whole lot, had the injury. I need to see more.
Remain.
I'm not gonna put him in a bucket. So then when the quarterback tiers came out, the average for him was like right on the line of a 3 or a 4. Well, I think it was clearly at least a 3, for how he played. And now I think we'll see if he gets into the 2s. I would think he's gonna look. I haven't done any of the ballots yet. I don't tip my hand, but I would think going into it, he's gonna get a fair number of 2s. I would think he's got to be in that realm, wouldn't you think he's going
to? When you legitimately, not anyone's opinion, but the NFL takes a vote on these things, and when you finish top 5 in MVP conversation, which he did, And when you're basically one, two, or three in every major passing statistic that's either, an old school statistic or a new school metric statistic. I mean,
Yeah.
Brock Purdy had the kind of year that has to take the biggest doubter and silence them just a bit. I mean, he was that good.
You'd think people, the worst they could say would be like, "Hey, you got to give him a 2." I mean, the guy's producing like a 2. Now, look, Kyle Shanahan, blah 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 blah. Kyle Shanahan, blah. You're always going to get that when you're in that type of a system, right? Those guys deserve some credit too. I mean,
Sure.
when you go, I always think this is funny. Like if you go on Pro Football Reference and look up like the all-time leaders and things like yards per attempt or net yards per attempt, these like Jimmy's going to be up there with like Peyton Man, all these guys that are clear Hall of Famers, and you're like,
Right.
was Jimmy that good or no?
Was
There's
Nick
something about the
Mullins
system.
that good? Was Nick
Yeah,
Mullins for those
yeah.
10 games that
So
good?
the system does get some of the credit here. I mean, I think you could have thrown Brock Purdy into the deep end in a lot rougher, stormier seas, and he might have drowned, right? I mean, it's a great position to be in, but you have to give him credit too. He really is a good, accurate passer who anticipates really well, perfectly in this system, and he can do that. They have faith in knowing that these guys are going to come open at certain points, but not everybody can do that. We've seen that when other guys are in there, and Jimmy didn't do it as well. So I think you do have to give him his due. I think he did it for a whole season pretty much. Had a couple bad games, but for the most part was really a good, consistent producer.
Yeah. And, the guy without the bad game in a football season, these are far and few between quarterbacks. It's going to happen. This league is unforgiving, and it really is. It's more any given Sunday now than it even was 10 years ago when that same law still applied. It's anybody can have a good game. Anybody can have a bad game. And it's just styles make fights all over this league. And it's why the NFL wins at all times. There's never a reason to just say that game can't possibly go the other direction. They all can.
I thought what was interesting was, he obviously did enough in the playoffs to help get them to the Super Bowl, but it wasn't just smooth sailing the whole way either. There were some rough spots. They're behind. There was debate about how much credit he should get in the comebacks, right? The way that those comebacks went when you really break it down. I think that made it kind of fun. And that's what's really fun about football to me compared to, look, I enjoy a good golf tournament, but like there's no mystery into why Tiger Woods had a bogey on the hole, right? We're not saying like, his caddy probably, no. In football, we do that. We're like, okay, how much credit do you give any one person? How do you interpret this run through the playoffs, right? I think for Brock, you just got to zoom out and look at the body of work and say, pretty darn good.
And I do think one of the things that the Niners have going for them is consistency. I mean, very rare do you get to return this many guys season after season. And it feels like the 49ers are just, in that run it back mode right now. And that kind of made this last draft, Mike, I thought really interesting for them because there were two masters to serve. The immediacy of 2024 being your last best shot to win a Super Bowl, and the fact that, hey, this team is getting demonstratively more expensive and some replacements for the future need to be acquired now to just make it smoother sailing once Brock is a $45-50 million a year man. Do you think that they threaded the needle of serving immediate needs with an eye on the future in this draft? Is there a particular player that you think the 49ers, that really intrigues you? Are there a handful of players where you think maybe this didn't fit the situation that they're in?
Yes. I think there was obviously some short and long-term thinking on Ricky Pearsall in the first round. So obviously they've got an issue with, one receiver signed through 24, the other signed through 25, and some real questions about what kind of contract Brandon Ayuk's going to get and what to do. How great do you feel about what's left on Debo's contract? So I think that one has a decent chance or a good chance to work because obviously Kyle Shanahan likes him and he seems to have a skill set that works for their offense. So I think that's probably makes sense in doing the short and the long term. Like I said, the injury situation at that position or just in their combination of 5 eligibles is something on my mind. So to add another guy who may fit well, no matter how you have to play it, right? You don't know who could be injured or whatever. That gives them another guy there that seems interesting. I guess of the other people, maybe the third round guard Pooney from was it from Kansas?
Dominic Pooney,
He
yeah.
was from. Yeah, I thought that was just kind of interesting. Seattle took a guard in the third round that maybe within a few picks, and so to kind of look at how those guys play out, I think the 49er offensive line has been on people's minds, right, as something that maybe could have been like if they hadn't made the Trey Lance trade, maybe one of those, some of those picks could have helped replenish the offensive line. So I think that would be an interesting one to watch in terms of does he develop? Does he become a starter? It's hard to develop linemen. It's just hard, super hard too. I've talked to Kyle Shanahan about that before. Just the way the season is set up, the way the realities of these guys having to play too soon, and they struggle a lot of the time. So I think that would be definitely an interesting one to watch to see in relation to some of the other linemen that were picked. Like I said, one of them in Seattle, I think Haynes was his name. Do they find a guy there? What happens to their line when Trent Williams retires? Right?
Yeah. No, a lot of fans, Mike, assumed that offensive line was going to be the first position addressed in the first round, and obviously they didn't see it addressed until the third round when they took Pooney. But you look around the NFC West, and again, this is why you're so valuable, because you understand the division so very well. You've got, I even saw you put a video up of Byron Murphy up in Seattle, who already is, got legs for days. He's got quadzilla legs. We saw the Rams go edge from Florida State. We saw the Cardinals go edge after Marvin Harrison was the choice. They took the kid out of Missouri. So it felt like the rest of the division was doubling down on the line of scrimmage while the 49ers waited around a while to address it. Maybe you didn't want that fifth or sixth best tackle before you had, Pearsall come up as the right choice on your draft board. And I can respect that. But are the Niners leaving a major incomplete, or are they a team that is returning every starter from a team that was just in the Super Bowl? So even if you want to criticize the offensive line, it really isn't that bad. You just won the NFC title with it.
Well, get this. So 8 offensive tackles came off the board before the 49ers picked at 31. Okay. So they picked at 31. And then there was a run. I'm just going to scroll here. The next tackle went 25 picks later. So the rest of the league validated the 49ers decision not to take a tackle there, right?
Yeah.
In that spot, because 25 more picks went before another one got taken. So, then you get into the whole thing. Another thing I look at is premium versus non-premium positions. Okay. And so to me, anyone who rushes the passer, which could be defensive tackle, anyone who is pass protecting, a wide receiver, all of those positions, corner, that get the most money are the premium positions. And in this draft, in the first round, there were only 2 non-premium position guys drafted. One of them was Brock Bowers, a tight end, who went to the Raiders, and the other was a center, Graham Barton from Duke, who went to Tampa Bay. So that's 2. In fact, if I scroll down here, the next guard, I think the first guard might have gone 44th. So in the first 43 picks of the draft, there were 2 players that were from non-premium positions. So if we just solved why they didn't do the tackle, that 25 spots went by before the 9th tackle went, what would you be doing at 31 taking a guard or an interior offensive lineman when we didn't have a guard go, like I said, until 44 to the Raiders? So, I kind of get it. Sometimes you're in a little bit of a no man's land for your needs. And they could have won the press conference by taking a tackle right in the first round and a guard in the second round. You say, hey, Kyle finally got it. He addressed the offensive line, but it may not be the best players. And then you get into the middle of the season. It's like, these guys can't draft for the offensive line. Look at them. They don't know what they're doing.
As someone who talks to, endless NFL executives and coaches and insiders, one of the things that, it's my least favorite part of my job as a Bay Area sports commentator is trying to convince people that Kyle Shanahan should have the job. All they see are 2 Super Bowl losses, and they can't really evaluate him through any other prism of success or failure, and that drives me nuts. What do you think of Kyle here now going into year 8 with the 49ers, what he's done and how quickly the league would be firing well-established coaches to hire him should the 49ers ever walk away?
Well, there's no doubt about that. I mean, I think it's rare to have a head coach where you can almost like prove that they're differentiating in some way, right? Head coaches are a little bit like quarterbacks where you're not 100% sure how much. Shoot, Bill Belichick couldn't do anything wrong, and then all of a sudden Brady's not there, and you're like, we're questioning Belichick, right? I think with Kyle, you can definitely see that he elevates the offense. So he is a differentiating coach in that way. Now, do we think that he is so bad in the other ways of leading the team that you wouldn't want him to be in that role? I don't see how you could say that. Uh, you could criticize certain things or say he wants too much control over this or that or didn't handle this situation well, but I don't see any fatal flaws there that would make you say that. We can criticize. They were a little up and down for a while. They've had some, you know, their record took a while to get to even be a much over 500, but it's there now. I mean, how many coaches right now would you rather have the head coach and confidently say they're going to upgrade from Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Andy Reid, based on
Yeah.
recent trophy collection, is above
Not
Kyle,
available. Not
but
available.
unavailable, and also how many more seasons does Andy Reid have? Kyle has at least 20. I mean, if Kyle coaches into his 60s, he's in his 40s. Yeah. He's got another 20 NFL years. I don't know if Andy Reid's got another 20 years on the planet. So, it's to me, Kyle is officially in that Phil Mickelson zone where he is clearly the best in the world who is yet to put on the green jacket. And all he needs is more starts in the Masters, and he'll eventually get it. Like, I think Kyle will win a Super Bowl. I just hope he's given the opportunity to stick around San Francisco long enough to do it here. And I do think that he's got a reasonable enough owner and some, blind to reality 49ers fans will be like, well, let me tell you, Eddie D would have gotten in a new coach to have done it by now because he had greater standards for winning than Jed does. No, I don't think so at all. I think Jed knows that he's got pretty damn good right here. Just got to get over the heap.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think, though, that one coach in one spot for a certain amount of time, it can become time. Like we even saw Andy Reid in Philadelphia. It wasn't like Andy Reid was a bad coach, and they didn't upgrade when they got rid of him. But I think we would all agree, in retrospect, that there was a time there where it was kind of time for everybody to move on, or like this year Pete Carroll, it was just kind of time. There's nothing Pete really did to deserve to be fired, but it was just kind of like. It was time. I covered Mike Holmgren when he was in Seattle after 10 years or whatever. It's just kind of time. So I think that will be the interesting thing because these experiences, when you lose in the Super Bowls, there is a cumulative effect to that kind of stays with you and can become a little bit burdensome over time if you fall too short too many times, even though you're amazing for doing what you're able to do. There does, I think, become a time where the weight of that makes it time to move on. I don't think that's where they're at, but they've missed a couple of really good opportunities where you were way ahead on the Chiefs one time, should not have lost. And then this one where it was a little bit of a flawed Chiefs team. It wasn't like it was the greatest Chiefs team ever. Those opportunities are precious. And I think one of the biggest missed opportunities was that year the 49ers before Kyle lost at home to the Giants in the championship game. Remember they had the fumbled punts and stuff. Like that was a team that should have won the Super Bowl. You don't get another chance that good. So that for all they know, they've had their best chances. And so what if 4 years from now, it's kind of taken a turn down and you just sort of feel like the weight of it, right? Where that's all you're being asked about. There could come a time where even though you're a great coach, it just can't go on forever.
Yeah, no, look, it's tough to defend Kyle going 0 for 2. It would be pretty impossible to defend 0 for 3 should they get back there again and lose it. I mean,
I would defend it, but I just think there's a cumulative. Would you fire Bud Grant? I mean, he's in the Hall of Fame. He lost 4 Super Bowls
and that's the thing. If Kyle's a loser, how about all the other coaches who aren't even in this game to lose it? What are they if he is the guy who can't get it done?
Yeah.
So
I think, I don't think that now the only fair criticism to me about not being able to get it done would be, does Kyle Shanahan's preferred style of play end up costing them against the best teams with the best pass offenses and quarterbacks. And what I'm talking about is, he's a little bit oriented conservatively, I think, with some of the end of half stuff we talked
Yep.
about, and really it's not in his nature to kind of press the gas pedal sometimes. Now maybe as Brock Purdy matures and, maybe he'll want to do that more. But I think that would be the one thing like you'd want to ask him about, is, hey, do we need to be a little bit more pressing the gas pedal sometimes in our orientation to get over the top? And his answer may be Bill Belichick wasn't. Even when he had Tom Brady, they weren't super aggressive all the time. But some of the way they play uh, isn't they're not as comfortable playing in a more wide open, just pass the ball, no threat of the run game. That's not their forte. So that would be my one thing is like, can you develop that a little bit better for them for the long term to maybe get over the hump?
Looking beyond just the teams in the NFC West, factoring in free agency and the draft, who made you go, damn, they just had a really good offseason, Mike?
Oh, these questions, I should be able to answer that question off the top of my head, but I'm more of like a digger into, assess the whole off seasons and tell you tomorrow what it is. Let me just buy a minute here and look through the teams and see. I thought Pittsburgh's interesting. I don't know what it does for them for the long term to have those two quarterbacks, but like I think they are an interesting team that could be
They
a little bit
prioritize their
better.
offensive line, that's for sure.
Yes, I think Chicago's done some interesting things. I think the way that they've gotten a couple of wide receivers now, I'm not sure they did enough defensively, but I kind of, am interested to see what they're doing. Um, I think Indy is a team where I really think Shane Steichen is good. And I think he's good with being able to devise plans for quarterbacks. Now, I don't know what Anthony Richardson's going to do, but they really added, a real pro-ready pass rusher in the first round of the draft. So I thought they could be a team worth watching. And yeah, those would be probably some teams that are interesting to me as maybe getting better.
And the team that's in your own backyard, again, Seattle is one of those. I'm going to have to see 8 weeks of football before I can
Yeah.
even tell you what they might be.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is a better chance that Seattle might get into halfway through this year and regret moving on from Pete Carroll? Or do you think that they are now pointed in a new, exciting direction that they needed to point themselves in to find further success?
I think it's not a given that they'll have a better record. I think Pete Carroll, even in these last couple bad years, was 500 or 9-8, that type of a record. So that's a pretty high floor, isn't it? You have
Yeah.
a new coach coming in who is not experienced. He was an intern 10 years ago, and he may be a really great coach, but you can't expect him to be as far along in his philosophy and handling the team. But we don't know how he's going to lead the team, that sort of a thing. So I think that it was time probably to move on from Pete. I don't think there's going to be this feeling of they should have kept Pete for this year. But I do think that, you know, don't underrate or discount what Pete Carroll was able to do now there. I think Pete was a very special coach.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they were 8-9 or 7-10 in this first year, in which case some people might say, hey, I don't know about shouldn't have changed, but what's the plan? Where are we going from here?
We get schedules on Thursday, and it's amazing how. I mean, I think that when you get the first slice of, all right, here's who you're going to be playing next year, that's not a very big news day. But the day you get the actual schedule and you can see the
Yeah,
path through the regular season, like that is an important day. I am interested in
fun.
schedules when they come out.
Yeah, I think it's fun when they come out. When I was on the beat, it was I wanted to know when I was going to certain towns.
Sure.
I don't travel as much during the season now, but I do like to see how it all comes together. I do like that, and who's sort of got. Hey, who has a chance for a fast start? Like, does Miami have a bunch of home games early when it's hot? Jacksonville, those sorts of things. Wins your international game. I think it's fun to look at.
Do you think we're going to be reaching a season where everyone is leaving the continental United States for at least 1 week of the year? I mean,
Yeah.
I see this 18 game schedule coming like a train through a tunnel. You can see the headlight getting closer. And I mean, if we get to 18, Mike, why not just quit screwing around and say, okay, no more preseason football. We got 20 regular season games here. Here we go.
I know. So for me, I think the league is testing the idea that the quality of the product doesn't really matter and people are just going to watch it. But I do think that, whenever they do these negotiations, the league tries to grow the revenue by adding games and the players get back less practice time. But at a certain point, I would like to see something's done to help with better development. And so, like, they've got these 16-man practice squads and all this stuff, but when's their time to practice them? I think they need to find a way. Okay, you're going to get rid of the preseason. Why? It's only because that's what the players would get back as a chip. Do you think that's best for the good of the game? Are we really that worried? I mean, they've cut back so many of these off-season camps. Are we really worried about load management? I mean, at a certain point, these guys need more work to sharpen their skills and maybe even to hold up physically.
Well, especially from a tackling standpoint. I mean, tackling just seems to be
or blocking. How do we develop these? If you're a coach, how do we develop these offensive linemen? Or now everyone just drafts a quarterback in the first 12 picks because you can't develop a guy. It's the only way you can get playing time in your system.
By the way,
bringing in some guy now. Brock Purdy, showed us the exception to the rule, but for the most part, like I hope they don't pinch back to so much of the off-season work and the preseason that it just becomes a sloppier game. And I know people, who've been watching the league a long time who just notice the fundamentals eroding, not because players today don't work at their craft. That's not anything like that. It's just you can't be as good at it when you don't practice as much, right?
It's the Harbaugh iron sharpens iron. I mean, it sounds like that goes on a t-shirt, but it's real.
They don't need 2-a-days, 4 practices in the heat where you're doing goal line drills and everyone's getting hurt and concussed and all of that. But I do think, let's not go too far into not practicing. And I know somebody like a Kyle Shanahan, they want to develop these players, but when do you do it?
Right. It's, how quickly can you learn the league before your body gives out on you? And that is the individual race that every single player in this league is running, and you don't have much time to figure it all out.
Yeah.
Because the NFL, it still officially does stand for not for long when things get off to a rough start. Mike, the biggest compliment I think you can give anybody who covers sports is people who consume what you do become more informed, more reasonable. You have a well-researched approach to everything that you've done in your career, which is why I think you are on that tier 1 covering the NFL line of all NFL journalists. You are a special guy. I've always appreciated our relationship, and thanks very much for coming on today. I appreciate your time.
It's great. Really appreciate it, Damon. Always have enjoyed our conversations going back to whatever it is, 15, close to 20 years now. So
a long time.
Best of luck with everything, and we'll talk again soon.